to a movie premiere?
I saw it at Landmark at Penn Center. So, yeah, it was good. The kids loved it, boys loved it.
West Lincoln at all?
Council?
Thanks for sending
That's
me
why I say that
I-
Chewbacca one,
I
eh?
loved it. I loved it. I loved it. It was great.
What question?
Good evening, members of council, staff, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us. Happy New Year. Thank you for joining us for our regular council meeting on Monday, January 9th, 2017. I see that we have quorum and I call this meeting to order. We will start with the singing of the national anthem, and I would ask all who are able to rise. I am looking for somebody to start. Peter normally starts for us. Councillor Papp? Perhaps, well, I guess I'll try. Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love, in all thy sons' command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north, strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Thank you. Can't wait till Councillor Papp comes back, or Nancy Bizzato, our clerk, who leads us as well. So thank you all. It has been moved by Councillor King, seconded by Councillor Ribbiak. Be it resolved that the agenda for the January 9th, 2017 regular meeting of council be adopted. I do have an amendment. It has been moved by Councillor Durley, seconded by Councillor Ribbiak, that the resolution under item 952 be dealt with separately. Is that correct, Councillor?
I was going to lift that from consent, but Mr. Mayor,
Okay.
so that could come later on in the
So
meeting.
that would
Just
be
lift it for-
both of those items?
Well, it's one item, but it's two resolutions under the one item.
So we'll deal with it immediately following consent, is what you're asking. Is that correct? So just before 10?
Well, it's going to be lifted from consent, so.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'll call the question on that amendment. All those in favor? Any opposed? That amendment carries. Any other changes to the agenda? There being none, I call the question as amended. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion carries as amended. Next, we have disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. That is any conflicts of interest that any members of council may have. Do any members have any conflicts they need to declare?
No, Mr.
There
Mayor.
are none. Can that be so noted in the minutes, please? Thank you. We have a couple of presentations and a delegation this evening. The first is regarding tax write-offs under section 357 and 358 of the Municipal Act. And usually we ask if there's anyone present that would like to talk about any of those items under the tax write-offs portion. Are there any members of the public present that would like to comment on those write-offs? Nobody is jumping up and down, wanting to comment on that. I'll call a second and third time. Okay, thank you. So it has been moved by Councillor Kersey, second by Councillor Junkin. Be it resolved, the council approve the following tax write-offs under section 357 and 358 of the Municipal Act as follows. Write-offs totaling $2,110.08. Questions or comments? There be none. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. Another financial matter. We have our auditor here, Trevor Ferguson. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Ferguson, and congratulations on winning the award for auditing for the town for the next 5 years.
Thank you for having me back.
Thank you.
So my intention will be to go through our audit service plan for 2016. I believe we got a PDF copy up on the screen here. I'm not sure if I can, nope, I just can't make it any bigger at this point, so we'll leave it like that. This plan looks a little bit different from what you would have seen from me in prior years. That said, there have been no changes in audit standards and no changes in accounting standards. Obviously, there are some unique circumstances at the town with some of the development you have going on this year, so our role and some of the things we're going to be looking at will be a little bit different this year, but there's no change in accounting standards that you follow at all. So my intention will be to go through this at a pretty high level, but I'll be happy to take any questions as we go through or hold till the end, whatever you guys are most comfortable with. In terms of our audit objectives, we'll be here to provide an opinion on the financial statements of the town and the town's trust funds. So that's, again, no change from prior years. In terms of some of our risk areas, I'm going to skip over those for a minute because I'm going to get into a little bit more detail just in a few minutes. In terms of key team members, I'm obviously back as the engagement partner. Elaine Farr, who you may remember, is back from her maternity leave, and she's back as the manager on the audit. So we're very happy to have her back. What we're trying to do over the next couple of pages here is just explain our audit at a pretty high level. We start off by referring to the fact that there are no significant events. What that means is that, in our opinion, there aren't any really major significant events that are going to impact your financial statements. That's not to say that there have not been significant things that happened at the town over the course of the year. Obviously, with the development, that's a pretty big thing. And we are going to take a look at that, and we've incorporated that as part of our audit planning process. In terms of our audit scope, in terms of engagement, I'm just going to make this a little bigger on my screen here, sorry. Is that okay on the, that's okay up there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We did receive an advance copy, so thank you.
Perfect, okay. So in terms of our audit scope, in terms of engagement, we do have our engagement letter that's been provided, and I already have a signed copy back, so thank you very much for that. In terms of materiality, we'll continue to perform our audit with the concept of materiality in mind. Obviously, we're not here every day auditing every transaction that happens, so we do take sample sizes and use thresholds and things like that. All very much are in accordance with Canadian audit standards and nothing unusual. In terms of the group audit concept, we continue to be in a group audit concept with respect to your sub, the Power Inc. So we'll be following the same standards that we had in prior years with respect to that. With respect to fraud, there's a big, huge box on this slide with respect to the risk of fraud and the things that we need to consider as your external auditors. It's not meant to raise any red flags whatsoever. Every single audit of any financial statement in Canada must consider the risk of fraud, and we need to do that as your auditors as well. As we have in prior years, we'll circulate an email out to council members with some questions to you. We'll also ask some questions of management, and we'll perform some specific procedures as well in and around the risk of fraud as well, and I'll get to those in a few minutes. So on to some of the risk areas. We do have a significant number of risk areas in our file. It's probably well over 100. This is just a summary of just some of those risk areas that we wanted to bring to your attention today. The first of which is revenue and deferred revenue amounts, and you'll notice there's an asterisk beside that. That's because that's considered a significant risk because Canadian audit standards presume a risk of fraud around the revenue recognition. Again, that's the same thing for any audit anywhere. So we'll be doing a fair amount of detail testing and substantive testing in and around revenue and deferred revenue and amounts. Quite frankly, in a municipal environment, that risk could change on a year-to-year basis because some years you could have a big surplus and you may have a desire to record a number of expenses or reduce revenues, and vice versa in other years where you may have a big deficit. So we recognize that that's something that could change on a year-to-year basis, and us as your auditors, we're always looking out for things like that, and wherever there may be a management bias to get closer to budget results, just for example. We've never noticed anything unusual whatsoever in our audit of the town in the past, but we'll continue to perform those procedures on an annual basis anyway. Year-end cutoff, you'd see that in any audit of any set of financial statements, just making sure that the transactions are recorded in the appropriate fiscal year. Some of the transactions late in 2016 and early 2017, we'll make sure that they're in the right spots. Tangible capital assets, that's a risk area for any municipal audit, and particularly this year with some of the development going on in the town. We'll be looking into things like overdevelopment credits and all those kinds of things in your role as a town, as a developer. You are a little bit more now as well. In terms of year-end accruals and other estimates, there are a number of estimates that go into the preparation of your financial statements. They're never exact. They are at an as-at date, so we have a number of estimates need to be made in order to prepare those financial statements. So we'll be taking a look at those estimates, both to make sure that they're reasonable and the process that was used to generate those estimates was reasonable and appropriate. One of the things that we'll be doing as well is to take a look at estimates that were made as part of last year's financial statements to get an idea of the outcome of those estimates this year. The idea is for us as your auditors is to get a feeling as to whether or not there's a tendency to overstate or understate when you're making your estimates. The last piece, risk area here, is around management override of controls, and you'll notice that that also has an asterisk beside it for the same reason. The Canadian audit standards presume a risk of fraud around management override of controls. The theory being you could have the best internal control system in the world, but if there's an ability for management to override that system, then that system is useless. So what we'll be doing to kind of combat that, if you will, and address it as part of the audit, we'll have those discussions with management, we'll have those discussions with this committee, with the council, excuse me. Another thing that we'll do is a journal entry test. So what we'll be doing there is to take a look at, we'll take a sample of journal entries that were entered over the course of the year, and get an idea of any entries that may be unusual, perhaps prepared or posted by somebody who's not involved in the process, entries that may be repetitive and look somewhat unusual. Maybe there's a small dollar amount that's recorded regularly on every second Friday. So things like that that may pop up that may be unusual. We're going to take a look at some of those types of things to see if there is anything that's unusual, and do a little digging on that. Again, we've never noticed anything unusual in the past. We have done that test for all our years as auditors of the town, but we'll continue to do it this year as we're required to as your auditors. I'm going to skip over Appendix 1. This is a detailed look at our audit approach. I'm happy to take any questions or go on any more detail, but I would suggest in the interest of time that we skip through it. Appendix 2 just covers over 2 pages down the left-hand side here. There's 17 items. Those are our required communications to you in Canadian audit standards. And just for fun, down the right-hand side, we've listed the audit standard reference right in the handbook in case you're so inclined to go and check up on it and have a good read. And really, that's it for our audit plan perspective. I'm happy to go through anything else in more detail, or I can just stop there and take any questions that you have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ferguson, for your presentation. Do members of council have any questions for our auditor? So I have just a couple of quick questions, again, just for clarity. So the first is the report and your presentation, you identified those asterisks. It says these areas have been identified as areas of significant risk. Just for clarity, that's not specifically at the town, that's across the world, right?
That's any audit anywhere. So Canadian audit standards say that those 2 areas are fraud risks. In Deloitte speak, we turn those into significant risks, which means we do a little bit more work. It's the same thing, it's just terminology.
Okay,
yes. Great,
thank you. And the final question is, and you touched on it, and maybe you could just go into a little bit more detail. One of the things that we spoke about last meeting when the award was given is that one of the criteria for looking at for a new auditor is the town as developer, I think was the language, saying that the firm that would win it would have to make sure that that firm knew about development and the town's involvement in development, et cetera. So can you just comment maybe a little bit more specifically? You've highlighted a couple areas. Can you just comment a little bit further about other areas in which you're going to be looking at the audit from that sort of developer point of view, or through those eyes?
So as your auditors, the first thing that we do when we decide the accounts that we want to look at, we do a bit of a scoping exercise. So what accounts are material to the financial statements, whether they're qualitative or quantitative. Any of those accounts that you have, especially new accounts that you would have created over the past year, particularly related to development, those would be scoped in, first of all, so that they're of interest to us, and we're going to make sure that we do a pretty good level of auditing on those accounts. Things like those overdevelopment credits, and those are sensitive areas where there could be some estimation. There could be some valuation estimation in terms of the number of credits and the valuation of those credits. Those are some of the things that we're going to need to look at this year as they pertain to your financial statements. I'm not sure of the quantum of some of those dollars right now, but when we get in to do the work, I'll obviously be taking a look at that to determine how material, in fact, they are to your financial statements.
Okay, thank you very much. It's very helpful. Thanks. Anything else by members of council? Thanks again for your presentation. So it has been moved by Councillor Kersey, second by Councillor Junkin. Be it resolved that the information presented by Deloitte regarding the 2016 Audit Services Plan be received. Any further comments or questions? There being none, I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you very much, Mr. Ferguson.
Thank you.
Look forward to working together with you. And I'm pleased that the Deputy Treasurer is here as well. Often comes on audit night when we talk about audit. So thank you very much, Ms. Tunikaitis, for being here. Here, Trevor. Next on our agenda, we do have a delegation regarding the Quaker Meeting House designation proposal. Ms. Botari and Mrs. Lamb, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Council, Mayor, staff. Mary, who I think is going to just sit back there for now.
Okay.
Mary and I are here to request that the town of Pelham pass a bylaw to designate the Quaker Meeting House or the Women's Institute building located at 1411 Maple Street in Fenwick a heritage building. The Society of Friends, or Quakers, settled in Pelham in the late 1700s and built the original meeting house, a log structure at the corner of Effingham and Welland Roads. That building was replaced in 1807 with a larger frame building. In 1828, the congregation split into two groups. The conservative members left the Effingham Road site for Pelham Corners, while the followers of Elias Hicks, known as Hicksites, remained where they were. In 1875, the Pelham Hicksites replaced the frame building on Effingham Road with the white meeting house. The Effingham Hicksites eventually rejoined the conservative Quakers on Haste Road in Pelham Corners and no longer used the white meeting house. In 1929, the Women's Institute had that building moved to Fenwick, where it was used by the Institute until about 1970. Since the early 1970s, the Model Railroad Club has used the original Quaker Meeting House for their displays. The Quaker Meeting House is a building worthy of a heritage designation. The Society of Friends was an integral part of the establishment of Pelham and its growth and development. The meeting house's history and structure have been thoroughly documented, and it has been identified as a priority property for designation, not only by the former Municipal Heritage Advisory Committee, but also by the Pelham Historical Society, as noted in the 2007 document, Historically Significant Buildings in Pelham. The exterior wood siding and trim are original to the 1875 building. The windows are also original to the 1875 building and are in remarkable condition. A few of the windows do need some new glazing. Otherwise, they have been well preserved, in part due to the aluminum storms placed over them. The interior of the building still boasts the original wood floors, wainscoting, and trim. Despite being moved from Ridgeville about 90 years ago and having limited maintenance, the building is still in excellent condition. The original front porch and two entrances were removed. The building was put on a concrete brick basement, and a front vestibule was added to the building by the Women's Institute when the building was moved in 1929. The basement and vestibule also remain in near original condition. A heritage designation would in no way limit the future use of this building. A designation would simply identify the heritage features worthy of preservation and conservation. These features include the original windows, sashes and trim, the original exterior wood siding and trim, the interior floors, wainscoting and trim, and the original front vestibule. Replacing the windows and or covering the building with vinyl siding would not only be changing the original fabric that is significant to the building, it would be trading proven long-lasting materials for ones that have a lifetime of about 25 years at best. This is the antithesis of preservation and environmental responsibility. Removing any further trim work or changing the front vestibule would all be detrimental to the heritage of the building. We hope that Council will continue to honor Pelham's history and make every effort to designate this exceptional building, a building with two unique histories. So this is, there's aluminum windows on top, but beneath are the original windows. Now this would be on the south side of the building. South side, the windows, the glazing has gotten a little bit, taken a little bit more more of a, I guess, a beating from the weather and does need to be replaced. But the wood sashes are all in fine condition, they're not rotting or anything. There's the wood siding on the building. It needs a little bit of scraping in spots, a little bit of paint, but even that, it's not in very bad shape as it is right now. The trim, there's the trim. You can see the trim along the sides here, the trim all underneath the fascia and the soffit is all still original to the building from 1875. This is the interior. This is the wainscoting that goes all the way around there. These are the windows on the north side of the building. They work fine. They can be open and closed. They function perfectly well. Wooden floors are still original to the building. This is the wooden trim around. All the windows and the doors that are original to the building still have all their original trim. Oh, I thought I had one in the vestibule. That's okay. The vestibule is the little piece that sticks out the front. Because when they moved it, they had to put it on they put a basement on it and a foundation. That lifted it about 4 feet off the ground. So the vestibule now has a staircase that leads up into the building, but that was put on in 1929 also. That is our request. We hope that it'll be given some very serious consideration.
Thank you. I think there's a last line there as well.
Would you like to speak to that, Mary, about the Historic Society and the possibility of a plaque at some time?
I recently took a group of ladies from St. Catherine's, 25 of them actually, around Fenwick. They wanted to look at the old buildings. And we parked outside that building, and I was rather embarrassed to see that there was nothing to show that that was, in fact, the original Quaker, or an original Quaker meeting house. And so, should the council, in its wisdom, decide to designate it, I would be happy to suggest to the Historical Society, which, as you know, has put several plaques up in the town, that they should put a plaque with a history of the building onto or close by the building.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. Members of council have any questions for our presenters? Councillor Junkin?
Yes, to you, Mr. Mayor. This plaque that you speak of, would that be a standalone plaque in the front of the building? And would it have anything to do with the, or could it be a plaque that we've already had designated to the building that would, I take it, would bolt, screw onto the building? What do you envision as a plaque?
Well, the Historical Society plaque, it's like the one they have outside Town Hall for Dexter Deverado, and it's on a pole, and it actually has a bit of a story with some of the history,
standalone then,
or the
yeah.
two histories. Yeah, it would stand alone.
Okay, yep, thank you.
Thank you. Others? Councillor Durley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, the Heritage Committee had a actual heritage designation plaque that they were going to put on these things. Is that's still in existence? I know there was talk about that being done, and I know prototypes were made. Would this also be something that would be put on the building, or could be put
Well,
on?
every building, through you, Mr. Mayor,
Go ahead.
that has a heritage designation, I think the plan was to
Will
have
have
those
it.
plaques
Okay.
put on them.
Yeah, good.
There are four houses, private houses, that are designated now. There's the Comfort Maple, and there's the Fenwick Flagpole. And I do believe the town has at least 4 plaques that were made, but I don't know if they've ever been put on any of the designated buildings yet.
Okay, we'll follow that up.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Councillor Junkin?
To those plaques that we've been talking about, I did phone a member of the planning division up, and yes, those 4 plaques are indeed in the planning department office, and I would like to, if I could, seeing as the Heritage Committee did do a fair amount of work to designate these 4 buildings, and seeing as a company that we do a lot of business with was kind enough to donate these plaques. I would like to, if I could, put a motion before this council that we instruct staff to put either come with some way of ceremony or some way in which to get these plaques installed. And I was thinking, and this is just my own thought, that in another month we're going to be opening a library. That's going to be a brand new library. It would be kind of unique if we could take 4 steps and at that same time uncover a heritage plaque, because the library is one of the buildings designated with a plaque. So just throwing it out there, but if I
Okay.
could, I would like to put that motion to council.
Okay, thank you. So I guess we'll put the motion on now. It's been moved by Councillor Durley, seconded by Councillor King. Be it resolved, the information presented relating to the Quaker Meeting House be received and the documentation be referred to staff for appropriate research and report as it relates to the potential heritage designation for the site. So Councillor Junkin, you're asking for an amendment to that, an additional
Yeah.
information, so that I would guess we get a report back from staff
Yes.
on those plaques
Yes.
and suggest appropriate times to designate them. Is
Yeah,
that
that's what I'd
what
like.
essentially your motion is, Councillor?
Yes, yes, council. Thank
Okay.
you.
So that we, right, my understanding is, is the library one of the 4? Maybe
Yes.
Ms. Means, can you-
4 houses in the library, right?
There's the flagpole, the old town hall,
No.
the Quaker house.
Botari?
The Kinsman House on Pelham Street, the Moore House on Tice Road, the Comfort House out on Cream Street. I believe that one was finalized.
Yes.
Just
we've
recently.
approved that.
The Pollard House next to Old Town Hall, the Flagpole, and the Comfort Maple. Those are the ones that have a
Oh.
bylaw heritage designation, and hopefully the plaque that says heritage designation somehow attached to them or put with them.
The flagpole's designated.
Pardon me?
The flagpole's designated, isn't it?
So direct staff to investigate previous heritage designations and,
Plaque.
and, and plaquing thereof.
In the library.
And appropriate. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Kersey, thank you. Any further discussion to that? I'm going to add here that also includes the potential for Maple Acre Library. Councillor Kersey?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just for this council's information, I did attend at that building with Mr. Schultz and Mrs. Lamb and Ms. Batari. So the acknowledgement that the trim and the windows and the siding and what have you are all original was not just something that was pulled out of the air. Mr. Schultz, who is, as we know, an expert in this field, certified that they were in fact the original windows and in fact the original siding, et cetera, et cetera. So, and also being an engineer, that the material was in excellent condition. So I think it's worth giving it a good hard look at whether we should do it and defer any further change to the building until such time as we know where we're going with it.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? First, we have to call a question on the amendment, Councillor Duncan's amendment. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That amendment carries, and now the motion is amended. Thanks for your comments, Councillor Kersey. I do have a question, Ms. Botar, maybe you can help. By my read of the history, of course, I've known that it had this history. I didn't quite know the dates. When it was how was it termed here, that from 1875, you used the word the society, the Hexit building? Hicksite building, thank you. So between 1875 and 1929, it was in the location at Welland and Effingham. Was there a period where it was not in use, where the congregations came together? I'm seeing Mrs. Lamb nod her head.
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah.
It certainly fell into some disrepair.
So it wasn't sort of 1 minute they're using it, the next minute it gets moved. Okay. I guess when I looked at the dates, So there are 54 years as a Quaker house, and perhaps it was vacant during some of that period. 41 years specifically for the Women's Institute, but it's been 47 years that it's been used by the members of the Greater Niagara Railway Club. I guess my question is, your presentation talks about make an effort to designate as exceptional building a building with 2 unique histories. Does it not have 3 unique histories?
Certainly, absolutely.
And so when one designates it, it's more the structure of the building as opposed to the use. Is that a good way to think about it, or is it both the use and the structure?
It depends on what you're designating.
Okay.
When you designate because the building has some importance to the community, but then you identify features that should not be changed. So for that one, I personally would think it should always stay white, because that's part of it. The white meeting house goes back to that time. Now, how it's used, it doesn't really matter, because the railroad people, they are not changing the building, they're
Right.
not putting a second story on it, although they've talked about possibly changing out the windows. But if the windows don't need to be changed out and can be preserved, you're preserving that bit of its heritage.
Okay, that's helpful. I appreciate.
Yeah,
appreciate the answer.
You could have the whole story, but you actually pick certain features that will not be changed in the future. So even if the building it got sold and became a little restaurant or something, the windows would be designated as the heritage of the building
Okay.
and should not be changed, or the siding or the color or things like that. It's like Niagara on the Lake, that you
Right.
designate, but you can have a different store inside the building, but certain things would not be changed on the facade, or if they have colors that they're not to use or can use.
That's very helpful. I appreciate the answer. Thank you. Anything further? Councillor Ribbiak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the report, very interesting report. I wonder, though, when the report goes to staff to look at, they might also consider the question of what needs to happen to the building to bring it up to some standard of energy saving. I'm sure it's not insulated based on this history. It hasn't been brought up to date in any way whatsoever. Perhaps that can be looked at as well. Or would that be counter to its status as a heritage building to bring it up to some modern standard?
Thank you. The CEO has an answer for
Thank you,
you.
Mr. Mayor. To answer the councillor's question, we've done that work a couple of years ago with the building assessment, so we can resupply that to council with the specific recommendations pertaining to this particular building as far as maintenance and upgrades go.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Christie?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a further question as well. When the report comes down, if they could comment on the accessibility aspect of it, whether or not, if it were designated, would it have to meet then accessibility requirements? So I think I'd like to know that as well. I think it'd be useful.
Thank you, Councillor Kersey. Just for clarity, are you thinking of the change that the province is making, that every public building has to be accessible by a certain date? Is that what you're referring to?
AODA standards.
AODA standards? Okay, it'd be interesting to know that in relation to designated buildings. So
Exactly.
thank you for asking that question. Staff will get the answer for us. Anything further? I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried as amended. Thank you very much for the presentation and for your ongoing work
Thank you
to
very
help
much for the
preserve the heritage and history of our community.
Thank you.
I'm going to add including accessibility. All right, thank you very much. Now we move to the next portion of the meeting. Councillor Beatty is not here because we haven't had any regional meetings. We can look forward to, I'm not sure he'll be at the next meeting, but certainly soon enough he'll be back with a report from the region. We're starting into regional meetings. Thank you very much again, ladies, for your presentation. Starting back again on regional business this week. So it has been moved by Councillor Ribbiak, second by Councillor Durley. Be it resolved, the following minutes be adopted as printed, circulated, and read. Minutes of the regular meeting of council of December 19th, 2016. Are there any errors or omissions? There being none, I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. Now we move to consent agenda items to be considered in block. We already had one moved, and that was 952, and that we'll deal with that immediately following this motion. Are there any items that members of council would like to lift for separate consideration? Thank you. There are none. So it's been moved by Councillor Durley, second by Councillor King. Be it resolved, the following consent agenda items be received, and the recommendations contained therein be approved as applicable. Recommendations arising from our policy and priorities meeting of December 19th, 2016. The motion be it resolved that those recommendations arising be approved. We also have the minutes of that meeting. We have action correspondence of a routine nature. This is regarding the Mayor's Youth Advisory Council and the constitutional amendments. And the motion be it resolved the council receive the correspondence from the Mayor's Youth Advisory Council proposing changes to their constitution, and the council hereby approve the amended constitution dated December 2016, and that the Mayor's Youth Advisory Council be so informed of this approval. We have some information correspondence items. The first are some resolutions dealing with the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority, one from the City of Niagara Falls and one from the City of Welland. An item was lifted, so we have remaining the City of Niagara Falls resolution regarding dental health programs, the City of Welland resolution regarding the Municipal Elections Act, City of Welland resolution regarding Phase 2 municipal funding, and Royal Canadian Legion, a very nice thank you card regarding Remembrance Day activities. We also have Education Foundation of Niagara information regarding their program Make Change for Children campaign. We have information regarding the Agricultural Drainage Infrastructure Program and some of the dates for approval for funding. And we have information from the Association of Municipalities of Ontario and their 2017 strategic objectives, including information about some of their programs. Finally, we have, under the Regional Municipality of Niagara, very interesting tax policy change, Regional Report CSD 79, 2016. Be it resolved, the council received the December 14th, 2016 correspondence from the region regarding a proposed tax policy change, and that the matter be referred to staff for review and report at the next regular meeting of council scheduled for January 16th, 2017, to advise of the impacts of the proposed policy change on the town of Pelham. And finally, we have some committee minutes for information, the Pelham Seniors Advisory Committee minutes of November 2nd, 2016. Any comments or questions on any of those items under the consent agenda items? I'm just going to say that I actually look forward to the information regarding the tax policy change. I thought it was very interesting that the City of St. Catharines came up with this proposal, and the idea is to try to activate vacant parcels or vacant buildings. So, and they would do that by not giving as large of a benefit to them or an incentive to them. So it'd be interesting to see. Obviously, according to their numbers, it didn't negatively impact the residential taxpayer that much. It was actually a bit of a benefit, but I look forward to the report coming forward. And I do want to say, I noted, unfortunately, Councillor Papp isn't able to be with us this evening, but the Pelham Seniors Advisory Committee is looking at or has looked at parking stalls, and I've had a member of the public that's come forward and who requires accessible parking stalls and wants to show me some of them throughout the town. So that may become more of an important issue moving forward, just for council's information. Any other items? I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. And Councillor Durley, I believe, had moved this. Is that correct, Councillor?
Yes.
And who,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Was there a seconder, Councillor? I'm sorry.
I seconded that.
Thank you. Would you want me to read it first, Councillor? Or
Well,
would you
I
like to read it?
could give a preamble of.
Go ahead, Councillor.
Of all this. It's actually, there's resolutions from two municipalities, one being McMurrich Monteith and the other Hornpayne. In a nutshell, mandatory municipal responsibility is fire prevention and fire protection and public education. The fire service represents a significant percentage of our budget, actually, with the equipment and the training and all that good stuff that goes along with it. Municipal fire departments and associated assets represent critical municipal infrastructure. Currently, there's no funding opportunities available from the province or the feds for equipment, training, maintenance, operating, or capital requirements of local fire departments. So what their motion says is their council's petition the provincial government to recognize the municipal fire service as critical infrastructure by including funding for fire infrastructure as part of the provincial government's infrastructure strategy to move Ontario forward. I think that is something we should explore as well, because we have an excellent volunteer fire service, and certainly any funding that we could get in that regard would make us even stronger. So I fully move to support, endorse, and circulate our petition to local MPPs and local municipalities that have volunteer fire services. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Durley. Councillor Ribbiak, any further comments as a seconder?
I concur with my colleague, Councillor Durley. I think that our volunteer fire department is important to this town at so many different levels, that anything that can be done to help strengthen that institution is of benefit to us all. So yes, of course, I endorse that.
Okay, thank you. Any others to the motion? Thank you very much for bringing it forward. I was actually intrigued. I guess I didn't think about it because we think, I think about the services here in the region, but it was very interesting to read that there are only, I'm going to say that, 32 full-time departments of the 449 fire departments operating in the province. There are 191 composite, but the majority are as ours is. And so it certainly makes the case that there should be some sort of funding to assist with these departments. So I appreciate colleagues bringing this forward, and we'll be supporting as well. We're ready for calling the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Thank you, colleagues, for bringing that forward, and we certainly appreciate that coming forward from those municipalities as well. Thank you. There are no reports from members of council. I will have one next meeting. So now we move to a motion that's been moved by Councillor Junkin, seconded by Councillor Kersey. Be it resolved, the town of Pelham, having given due consideration to the following bylaws, do now read a first, second, and third time and do pass the same, that the mayor and clerk be and are hereby authorized to sign and seal the bylaws. Bylaw 3818, 2017, being a bylaw to appoint Mr. Robert Goodfield and Mr. Dave Figueroa as municipal law enforcement officers for the corporation of the town of Pelham. I believe this is to help with winter operations. Comments or questions? There being none, I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion carries. It's been moved by Councillor King, seconded by Councillor Durley. Be it resolved, the following bylaw do be read the first, second, and third time and passed, being bylaw 3819, 2017, to adopt, ratify, and confirm the proceedings of council of the town of Pelham held at its regular meeting on the 9th day of January 2017. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. It's been moved by Councillor Ribbiak, seconded by Councillor Durley. Be it resolved, this regular meeting be adjourned until the next regular meeting scheduled for next Monday, January 16th, 2017 at 6:30. Unless sooner called by the mayor. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion carries. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Is that a record?